Resources Agent with UF Extension. We are here at Brooker Creek Preserve, and we're gonna look at some common tree species you'll see here. This first one, a little bit of a giveaway, is a water oak, which you can see here from the sign. I'll let you guys come here and explore more about what these signs are talking about, a little teaser, but this water oak, a few ways to tell that this is in fact a water oak, is the leaf shape. So they have what we call a spatulate leaf shape, where it's much broader at the tip of the leaf than it is at the base. It gets very, very narrow at the base. And then if you flip the leaf over, this takes a little bit of closer inspection, but if you look at where, we call this the mid vein that runs through the center, where it meets with these other, what we would call axillary veins, there's these tiny little tufts of hair that looks like a little rusty patch. That's a distinguishing characteristic with water oak leaves. And they are what we call tardily deciduous. So you'll see most of the other deciduous trees have already lost their leaves, and these are just starting to lose their leaves. So they're a little late to the deciduous party. Okay, so this is another common tree species that you'll find here at Brooker Creek Preserve. This is actually a sand live oak, which is just a different variety of the live oaks, which will also feature. One of the distinguishing characteristics with the sand live oak is the leaf. So I'm going to just take one off for educational purposes here. So if you look at the leaf of a sand live oak, they have, if you look at the very edge of the leaf, it's kind of folded in along the edge and almost creates this little boat shape. And the underside of the leaf you can see is much lighter than the top side, and that's because the bottom side is covered in these very fine hairs. You can actually feel them with your finger. It kind of feels a little bit like velvet. If you want to get adventurous, one thing that I always tell people they can do, maybe not here at the preserve, especially we're not going to be picking leaves here at the preserve, is you can actually use your tongue to feel the underside of the leaf. Sometimes your tongue is very, very sensitive, much more so than your finger, to detect if there's hairs. So I encourage you to experiment at home with a tree that you know is not something like poison ivy. So I'm really looking at the leaves, and then they have this very, very, just curving structure with their branches, and sand live oaks in particular, as well as live oaks, are just very, very curvy in their appearance, compared to something like the laurel oak that's a lot more straight. Okay, so I'm currently at the oak shelter, and I want to take you over to one of my favorite pine trees that used to be about my height just a few years ago. This is a sand pine. It's one of 3 pine species that we have here at Brooker Creek, and even in all of Pinellas County. So the sand pine's unique from our other 2 pine species in that it retains its lower branches. So you see they go all the way to the bottom of the tree. And also the needles are much, much shorter. They kind of have a twisty appearance to them. And when they come off of the twig, they're always in bundles or fascicles of 2. So that when they come off, there's always 2 needles together. So this is one of our other pine species that we have here. This is a young slash pine. I'm using the young one just so I can access the needles to show you guys. So I mentioned before with the sand pine, they retain their lower branches. So you can see here that most of the branches have already kind of like self-pruned, some people will say. You will notice the needles are significantly longer than the sand pine, and the bundles or fascicles and needles on the slash pine come in 2s and 3s. So I actually found one here that has, it's not the best looking needle right now, but there are 1, 2, 3 on this bundle, and then the one right next to it, you guys probably can't see this that well, has 2. And so you'll see a mix of this throughout, within one particular tree. We'll have bundles of 2 and 3. Okay, so we're at another tree that's featured as part of our traveling tree walk. This is a pond cypress. There are 2 different cypress species that we have here in Pinellas County, the pond cypress and the bald cypress. They really overall look very similar, everything from the bark to the overall structure. And you can see right now they're lacking their leaves, which doesn't make it easy, but the good part is when they fall, we can just look down and find some leaves on the ground. So although this doesn't look very exciting, this is a leaf, a dried up leaf of a pond cypress. You can see why they're referred to as needle-like leaves. They tend to be a little bit more straight. I know this one's a little bit curved. And this looks different from the bald cypress needle in that the bald cypress needle will look a lot more like a feather. If you look closely, there's little parts of this leaf. They say it's also owl-like, A-W-L, and these are pressed to the needle. So it makes it look more like a needle than a feather. Okay, this is one more common tree that you will see along the trail here at Brooker Creek Preserve. This is a red bay tree. Unfortunately, with the red bay trees, there's some sad news and sad ways of identifying this tree, and one of which is you'll start to see some dead and dying branches and leaves. This tree is currently experiencing a disease called laurel wilt disease. It affects all the trees in the Lauraceae family, of which the red bay belongs. Aside from that, the leaves themselves, they can vary in size, but overall they kind of have, let me find you a better example, kind of this long elliptical shaped leaf. They're very smooth and shiny, much duller on the underside of the leaf. And if you rub the leaf, it gives us a very nice aromatic smell. So think of like bays when we're cooking. So that is also helpful for identification with this tree. Okay, so in the swampy areas, you'll often find Dahoon holly tree, and you might get caught by the beautiful red berries. They're not on all of the tree species. The female trees will produce these pretty berries. They have relatively smooth bark. They tend to actually have multiple trunks. So if you look down at the base, if you follow it down to the ground, you can see this one has two. And they tend to be quite branchy and not very dense clusters of leaves. Their leaves tend to be relatively small, shiny, kind of a paler green on the underside with somewhat of a bristle tip at the top. And birds love to feast on the berries.